And our next contributor is the co-leader of the Social Democrats, Deputy Catherine Murphy, please.
Thank you. Taoiseach, I'm sure you paid close attention to the Taoiseach's Ardèche speech at the weekend, given they're your partners in government. I don't think there's any doubt that we witnessed a political transformation unlike almost anything we've seen for the last 20 years. Having been an enthusiastic Tory fiscal conservative for his entire life, Mr Varadkar has seen the light. There were so many spending commitments announced on Saturday that Fine Gael delegates must have been checking to make sure that they were at the right event. I'll try to list some of the promises, but there were so many, I may inadvertently leave some out. A commitment to build 40,000 houses a year, an extra $4 billion a year for the health services, expanded medical card eligibility, occupational pensions, a living wage, more money for welfare payments, all paid for, not with tax increases, but some very vague sounding growth. At a time when the economy recovers from the pandemic, we're coping with Brexit, and our corporate taxes are set to reduce. Taoiseach, I wonder if you're fearful the next time you're down in Dublin Bay South, if you'll come across a Fine Gael bus with a big sign on the side of it saying that there's $4 million extra a year for the HSE, all emblazoned on the side of it. The tarnished other political inspiration, Boris Johnson, found that kind of stunt very useful. Now, I must say, given intimidation is or imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, I'm gratified that the Taoiseach has taken some of the Social Democrats' policies, including improved public services, better paying conditions for workers, social welfare safety net that people can live with in dignity, and much increased state investment in housing. But I'm not sure he's the credible person to deliver on this, given that Fine Gael, after 10 years in office, hasn't managed to reach the Rebuilding Ireland target of 25,000, never mind 40,000. Meanwhile, 1 million people are currently on hospital waiting lists, and it has taken Fine Gael 10 years to realise the problems with gifting a new 800 million maternity hospital to a private company with a religious ethos. My questions are, were you warned or even consulted in advance of these announcements? Do we now understand that the health budget will increase by $4 billion every year from now on? And will that come as a surprise to the Fianna Fáil Minister for Health? Is the Fianna Fáil Minister for Housing down in the Customs House busy planning the delivery of 40,000 houses? I hope so. Who in government is deciding fiscal policy? Is it solely a Fine Gael remit? Taoiseach, are you standing over all of those commitments, and just as importantly, are you standing over how they're going to be paid for?
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. Taoiseach.
Well, I didn't get a chance to watch all of the Fine Gael Ardèche, Deputy Murphy, but I did pick up some aspects from it in terms of the extensive media coverage. I can report that Minister for Health Stephen Donnelly is in rather good form over the last 48 hours in terms of the underpinning of the substantial health budget which will be required, and he might rather optimistically think that his bilaterals with the Minister for Public Expenditure may not be as difficult or challenging as health ministers generally have them with Ministers for Public Expenditure, but that remains to be seen. Could I say that in a more serious vein that the government's programme for government essentially obviously is to take this country through the pandemic as safely as we possibly can, and to facilitate the emergence then from the pandemic of a strong economy and a strong society, and also to learn the lessons of the pandemic in terms of both a stronger state in health, but with reforms and funding. It's not just about funding for health, it's about the reforms that go along with it. And I think we've learned a lot during the pandemic. So from our perspective, and I was very keen on this early and late summer, working with the Minister for Health to ensure, for example, that the winter initiative was introduced, 600 million unprecedented level of funding for a winter initiative and to give full year funding to that, which has made a significant difference to the capacity of the health service to withstand the normal winter pressures, never mind the third wave. And if it hadn't been for that level of investment in terms of home care packages, in terms of community diagnostics, in terms of acute capacity, then I think we would have been in even far greater difficulty during the winter period if we hadn't made that particular investments. Also, the information technology, the digital transformation that occurred in certain aspects of health, again, is something that we have to build on as we emerge from the pandemic. So there will be a stronger health budget, without question, as in the next year or two, to make sure that we embed the reforms that have been made and also to underpin the levels of services that are required. And of course, we are living longer generally as a society, and that will in itself create its own additional costs. In terms of housing, we are very, very clear that it is the single biggest issue of our time in terms of making sure that the current generation, particularly not just young people, but particularly young people who need to be in a position to get back into the housing market, to be able to buy houses that they can afford, and also that we can provide more social housing. And we are, with the Housing for All strategy, focusing on a very significant social housing programme for the next 5 years. Another key plank, of course, is climate change. And we've already brought into this House groundbreaking climate change legislation and have had it passed. So there's a very extensive
Thank you very much.
Time
is up.
Which we're very focused on delivering.
Murphy.
Taoiseach, COVID certainly has exposed huge weaknesses, including health, childcare and a range of other things, no doubt about that. But there were announcements made at the weekend. Do you stand over those announcements? Are we seriously, and I hope we are seriously looking at 40,000 extra annual 40,000 houses a year? Is that a government commitment? Were you consulted in advance? And what about the summer economic statement? Has work been done on that already? Is that on the way? Are these announcements likely to be included in it? Or is this just about electioneering? I think it's really important that we understand where the government is in some of these announcements, because there were a very, very long list of announcements. You might just address the 40,000 houses. Is that a firm commitment? Is that a commitment the government will stand over? And is it credible that what was announced can be paid for without tax increases and just by way of growth?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
The Taoiseach speech was to Fine Gael Ardèche, and you know, it's as a party leader, of course, the Taoiseach is quite entitled to address and present you know, the Fine Gael sort of perspective on a variety of issues. In terms of the summer economic statement, last evening we were presented with an overview of that and a presentation on that from the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Public Expenditure, which maybe might be characterised as a more sober assessment of the situation over the next 5 years. You know, it was no, just generally speaking in terms of the framework, but nonetheless identifying. You know, we knew for these 2 years there would be exceptional spending in terms of the pandemic, an exceptional deficit. But over the lifetime of the government, as part of the programme for government, we have said we will ease our way through to a balanced fiscal position over the next 5 years. And that's the trajectory that the ministers would have presented to us, and they will be doing more work on that before the publication of the economic statement. On the 40,000 homes, the Minister for Housing is preparing the Housing for All strategy. Obviously, we lost a lot of houses last year and this year, so over the next 10 years, we're going to have to build up. The SRI has said 33,000, but given that we've lost some houses in 2020, 5,000, maybe 6,000 to 7,000 in 2021. We need to make that up for the remainder of the decade.
Rockmid the Rai Ganesh son on group Regunuk Canara Anto and Chakta Pather Tobin.
Ilwekus Cancorlia. Taoiseach, the government's mismanagement of the hospitality sector has been a car crash. The collateral damage has been many, many pubs and restaurants, some of whom have been closed now.